Welcome back for another episode of building a studio desk and remodeling my studio. Here you can see one of the sides cut out. I've cut them out and routed them so all the sides are exactly the same. Now we're going to start putting some shelves in, figuring out how things go. You can see there's one that's built there. I just want to show you how it's all done. I use some dowels to put things together and some glue. And so I want you to see it and see how it all goes together. You can do dowels. You can do pocket holes. I use both and like both, but in this application, I just feel like dowels do a better job. They're stronger than the pocket holes. I like to use pocket holes for drawers simply because it's faster. And a drawer doesn't have to be as strong. With this, we're going to be putting a lot of equipment in these things, a lot of expensive equipment. So I want them to be pretty solid. And you can see there's two different types of plywood. Some of the plywood, the green is pressure treated. The reddish plywood is fire rated. All this stuff came off of a construction site, like I said, and we typically don't use regular plywood. Everything has to be either pressure treated or fire rated. Fire rating means that it's been treated with chemicals to keep it from burning. Not a big deal for what we're doing here. It's really, both of these are unnecessary, but when you get plywood that's worth over $100 a sheet for free, you take it. One of the things that kind of sucked about this plywood is it's just construction grade. It's not the greatest. So I had to do a lot of sanding. If I had to go buy plywood, I would have bought 5/8 sanded plywood and made this whole thing out of 5/8 sanded plywood. Would have saved a lot of time. But hey, I'm cheap, so I use what I can get cheap, and this plywood was cheap. So we're drilling holes for all the dowels. Everything was put together with dowels on these things. You could use pocket holes if you want, but I prefer dowels. I think they're stronger, especially in this situation, because I wanted these cabinets to be really rigid because of all the weight that we're going to be putting in them. And there's some drawers that are going to go in the bottom. So I wanted these cabinets to be rigid. That's also one of the reasons why I did not put adjustable feet on the bottoms of these things. The feet are about 3 inches long on each of the four corners. And that gives me good rigidity. And everything worked out. Everything sits nice and level on the floor. There's no wobbling at all when it all got put together with all the pieces between these cabinets. I also built the desk so that down the road, if I want to take it apart and move it, it will be very easy because all the pieces that go between these cabinets are just screwed in from the back side and underneath. So there's not an issue with pulling it apart and moving this whole desk to another studio. I'm hoping down the road to get a bigger room, move to a different house, but don't know when that's going to be. It could be 6 months, a year, 5 years. I have no clue. So I'm just going to put this thing together with the idea that one day I'm going to move it, and I don't want to have to damage it to move it. So I can pull it apart, move the pieces. Here's the piece up toward the top. This one is the front section that will go on two of them. It goes behind the drawers, and on the other two, it will be like a face panel where I don't have the desk overhang. So there's three pieces that go side to side to make this thing rigid. One down at the bottom, the back of the bottom shelf, one at the back of the top, and this one in the middle, which gives these units a very rigid construction. Okay, here's the other side of the unit that I'm putting together. The absolute worst part of doing these and drilling all these holes was making sure these pieces got flipped properly and then marked so I knew which way they went. I kind of messed up on the first one and had to drill a few extra holes. So I was very careful to mark everything so that I could keep track of where it all went. The other thing that I would strongly encourage you, if you're going to build something similar to what I've done, is buy yourself a really good doweling jig. I've tried doing it with the inexpensive ones that just, you drill the first set of holes, you put these little pins in the holes and put the board where you want it and smack on it and it leaves indents. It works. It's a pain in the rear to do it that way. The jig that I've bought to do this works really better. And you can see pretty well on this how I had to line everything up to try to get everything square. It was pretty tough, actually, to get all this to line up and be square. But if you take your time, I think anybody can do it. It's tough, but as long as you double check, triple check before you start cutting or drilling, pretty much anybody can do it. I'm not the greatest furniture builder in the world. I'm a rough carpenter, basically. So this was a challenge for me. It was a fun challenge, though. It took some time, but at the end, when I got it all together, and I've got it up here in the studio now, using it, I'm very pleased with it. There's a couple things that I would change if I was going to do it again, and I'll show you that when I'll talk about that when we get to the end video, and maybe you can do better than I did. Here you can see me working again to make sure everything's lined up properly. You can see my doweling jig there, which slides over the dowel that's in the shelf already. And then once I get everything lined up exactly where I want it, it's as easy as just drilling the hole down through the jig. It really is that easy. But you've got to make sure it all lines up. So you try everything 10 times and get it all laying exactly where you need it. So here we go, drilling the holes in the side. You really can't see it on this, but there is a stop on that drill bit that keeps me from drilling all the way through those sides. You can just barely see it there on the end on the drill, but it makes it quick and easy to drill those holes, and stops it just at the right depth so that everything goes together. I did have a little bit of an issue. I ran out of dowels and had to buy more at the local big box store, and the ones I bought were slightly longer than the ones I started with, and I had one side that I started gluing it up, and the shelf wouldn't go all the way in. It was about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little less than that, and I smacked it and broke the dowels through the side of the cabinet, and then had to do a little bit of work to sand everything down and fill the holes and make it look good. But that's down underneath the desk. Nobody's really ever going to see it. I just know that it's there. So there's the bottom shelf in place, and that's not glued. That's just a test fit. As I work around and get all the dowels put in and all the pieces, there's the back stiffener. And if you notice, I don't even have all the dowels in the holes yet up there at the top of that shelf. But I have to lay everything out and mark everything so I have a tight fit so that the glue will bond properly. You know, the glue gives this thing a lot of its strength. And then some countersunk screws just to hold everything in place while the glue dries. So between the dowels and the glue, you've got most of your strength on this with just a few screws holding everything in place. And, these things ended up being just a hair over 20 inches wide. So they'll be easy to get through a doorway when I decide to move, and be easy to put it back together. So now we're getting ready to put the thing together, and you can see all the dowels are in place on that side. And I've got my screws. I used some 2-inch deck screws to put this thing together. And here we go with the glue. And I'll be dropping these pieces on here in just a minute. I found that you really want to be pretty liberal with the glue. I'd rather it squeezed out and I had to wipe it off rather than not have enough. But the trick is, if you're going to stain, and I'm not on this one's going to be painted, but if you're going to stain, you need to make sure that glue gets wiped off right away. Otherwise, it will affect your stain. So just be warned of that if you're going to end up staining the whole thing. But quite honestly, this thing's going to end up being painted black. I prefer the black look over anything else. But hey, any color you want. And if you want to spend the money to buy some nice birch or oak or maple plywood, you can make this really nice. The other thing you're going to run into if you're going to stain is edge banding. I did not edge band this. I just filled it and sanded it because it's going to be painted. But if you're going to stain, you really need to edge band all these rough edges on this plywood. It just won't look good if you don't. Now, edge banding isn't that bad. It's you use some contact cement, and you can use it out of a spray can and just mask off the sides where you don't want that glue to hit, and spray it on, follow the directions, and trim it off. It works pretty darn well. So here we are. You'll be able to see this one where I drop it over the dowels. It's exactly lined up where it needs to be. I've already pre-drilled holes and countersunk them. So it's as easy as just going from underneath now and putting a couple screws in. And that draws everything tight and holds it in place and draws it tight so the glue grabs really well. If you read the specs on this glue, once it dries, it's stronger than the actual wood. So there's the bottom shelf. in place. If you look off there at the right, you can see some of the racks that I had built when I was on the road. And so there's 4 racks there holding my equipment, the stuff that I carried with me. And what's going to happen is I'm going to take those rails out of those racks and reuse them in these cabinets that I'm building. And you can see some of the equipment there, just barely, but you'll see it better when we get it all put together. Now here's the piece, the stiffener for the back of the top shelf. And so it was just a piece of pine 1x2 that I had laying around the shop. I didn't want to put anything more than that because I wanted the access from the back if I needed it. The way it worked out, I could have put something bigger, but it really didn't matter. Just having that L makes all the difference in the world. The one at the bottom actually gives me the most space, and it just did an excellent job of stiffening everything up. These cabinets do not rock at all. They're rock solid. So there we go. That's the ones that go between the sides. The top actually sits on top of the cabinet. So now we'll add the glue to those, and we're going to drop the other side in place. So here comes the other side. It was a challenge to get everything to line up and all those pieces with only 2 hands. If you've got somebody to help you, it makes it a whole lot easier. But you can see me struggling here a little bit because those dowels go in fairly tight, and you've got to smack things around a little bit with my plastic-headed hammer. And so getting everything where it needs to go is a little bit of a challenge. But we got it done. And then you can see we're just smacking everything down, and then we use the screws to pull everything tight into place and make sure we've got glue contact all the way across. So you can see on this just how easy it really was. Okay, so all screwed together. I'll get it down on the floor. And all we got to do is put the top on it. Now, I did not dowel the top. As you can see, I'm just drilling pilot holes. And now we're going to countersink those holes so the screw heads will be below the surface, so they'll be easy to fill. And here we go with the glue. Since any weight that's put on top is going to be pushing down, I don't have to worry about the glue or the screws failing. The pressure will be down equally on those sides, which transfers the weight all the way to the floor. So you're not going to have problems with anything breaking. And my plan is to just have speakers sitting on top. So maybe 50 pounds a piece. But there again, I want to apply a liberal amount of glue, since that's going to provide the vast majority of the strength to the joint. So lining everything up, and let's put some screws in it. Now, one of the things that I probably would do different if I built this desk again is, if you notice, you have the slope, and then when it hits that top, it goes straight up. I kind of wish I would have had that angle all the way up on that top piece. It looks fine the way it is, honestly, but it's just one of those little things that I probably would do different next time. And there it is, assembled.